Then okay, I'll pick up on this. I guess welcome to the July Province 4 and 5 Creation Care Network monthly gathering. So we are just following up on General Convention, which happened a week or so ago. And so we're all going to talk about that. So let's begin with prayer. The Lord be with you. O God, from whom all good proceeds, you established your covenant with all creation. Guide us and all your people, that we may walk upon the earth in righteousness and peace, and honor you in our kinship with all your creatures. Through our risen Lord Jesus Christ, who with you and the Holy Spirit lives and reigns, one God, to the ages of ages. Amen. So welcome, everyone. Let's do announcements then, of which there are several, I think, none of which I feel the need to be on point for. So who wants to start? Heather, I guess maybe you're the kind of the announcement queen.
I have some of them, and then Jeanette can pick up what I don't get to. Province 4 and 5 will be hosting a retreat in September. Here is a link to that. Also a reminder that if you ever get lost and confused, you can always find information at the Creation Care page on the Province 5 website. So please mark that. That also bounces over to the Creation Care event. If you're not registered yet and you're hoping that you're coming, please either register soon or let me know that you're planning on registering. At some point, we're going to have to count retreat rooms. Not a big deal. I don't want to freak anybody out with that, but I do, just let me know if you're like, oh yeah, I think I'm coming and I can't register yet, or I'm thinking about it and I need to work out some schedule stuff. We're still a bit away. It is in September. So that's coming along great. Several of you in this call are already registered, so it'd be great to see you there. The other thing to remember is that there are Facebook pages. So please follow the Facebook pages for Creation Care, and I will get that information in soon. Sometimes there are things that show up there that don't happen, that you don't see in other in the monthly newsletters that come out between Jerry and me. There is one other retreat that I'll dump into the chat at some point. Proctor Center. Many of you know Jerusalem Greer. She just sent me details about an event that's going to happen sort of right before our retreat, but I do want to share that with you in case that is something specific. It's for a very specific group of people, so I'll dump that into the chat too. So I think those are the big ones I had, and I know Jeanette had another couple that came through also.
So that was, I was glad you remembered that. Thank you, Heather. So there are a few of us in Michigan who have started talking with Rachel Field about the path and being a part of the training groups and finding people to help train leaders in our community and get things started in a start a green team at our churches. There is a meeting on Wednesday, the 24th. Let me go back here. The 24th from 5 to 6. Rachel will be a part of, and that Rachel is holding, is a Zoom meeting that Rachel is having for PATH, and we will be talking about how the trainings are going, what's going on. We have a pilot? There's a pilot area. I think Phoebe, you know more about that than I do. There's a pilot going on, pilot test. Let me just stop now. Anyway, if you'd like to be part of this meeting, reach out and I can send you the link
to that
because I don't have that right now.
Jeanette, between Phoebe and me, we've dropped everything in the chat, so people can just start.
There you
clicking
go.
on
Okay,
stuff.
there you go. I don't have to do that. So be a part of that. That would be great. I know that Steve Mulder and Jan Straight and I are going to be the people who are in contact, the contact people here in Michigan. So if there's anyone else that has any interest, let us know. Thank you. All right. You're off and running, Jerry.
All right, well, very good. And I also had dropped in the chat the Province 4 subscribe newsletter and the Facebook page and so on and so forth. So if you have arrived at this meeting without having been a subscriber to the Prop 4 newsletter, then you got to change that and become a subscriber to the Province 4 newsletter. It comes out every month and we kind of keep up with these kind of things. So, all right. Anything else of import for the good of the people before we move into our conversation of seeing none? We have, I think, three, well, main topic, convention. Phoebe Chatfield is here. You don't know, she works for the, what we colloquially say, 815. And for the presiding bishop's staff, I guess. Are you presiding bishop staff? Yes. So she's one of our key Creation Care people, and she was at convention. Of course she was. And so was I, and so was Heather. What I'm curious about now is who else on this call was at convention? Pam Harris, of course. Others, and others. Okay, so there's 4 of us who are there. So that sets our context for conversation, I guess. And so I think we're gonna hand it over to Phoebe, who will initiate our conversation about what Creation Care things took place and what import some of that might have for usins in these provincial networks and other work in Episcopal life. So
Wonderful.
with that, I guess, Phoebe, I'll let you take
Yeah,
it.
thanks, Jerry. Wonderful to see so many of you who I've worked with for many years, maybe some new people as well. It's great to be here. And it was great to be at General Convention, and it does feel like it was sort of just concluded. So this is a fun invitation to really start the process of debriefing and understanding what passed and what happened and what comes next for our shared work on creation care and environmental justice. This was actually my first time being at General Convention because in 2022 it was so pared back. So I felt really grateful to be around a lot of much more experienced, senior deputies who'd been coming to General Convention for years and years. And all of the resolutions that I shared and that I'll talk through in a moment, I just want to say really represented so much hard work by so many people. There were lots of grassroots efforts to submit strong resolutions. Many of them came out of diocesan conventions or province level work. There was a really hardworking Environmental Legislative Committee, Legislative Committee 15, which processed all the resolutions and combined them and reformulated them. And then there was 2 sort of caucuses of people who were thinking about the environment. There was a set of green bishops, and there was a set of green deputies. Jerry has the green deputy t-shirt on right now. And this was actually the first year that there was this well-organized sort of labeled Green Deputies Caucus. And I would be remiss to not mention Emily Hopkins, who's also the Province 8 Creation Care Coordinator, who really put in a lot of effort to convene people and make that Green Deputies Caucus happen. My role as staff was not to be advocating for any of these policies, but really to be a resource to all of those different groups of people. And it was a joy to work with them all. And now as staff, our role again is to receive these resolutions and start thinking about what comes next with them. Do you think it's worth to just pull them up, Jerry, and talk through? I think I'd be happy to do an initial talk through and then questions. And then if you want to talk, Jerry, more about where you see the most impact for this province, that might be a good order.
Yeah, or Heather and I both could feel free to interrupt and so on. But yeah, I think maybe sharing a screen with that list might be the most visually helpful thing.
Let's do it.
Um,
So the list that I shared with you all via email was alphabetical by resolution, but I also have been working off this list, which I've sort of reorganized for today to be by type, to make our conversation as clear as possible. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. Is this visible to you all? Can you see
yeah, that
it?
seems good. Yeah.
Great. So the first category of resolutions that passed were about task forces. I know several people on this call have been on previous iterations of a church-wide committee that works on creation care. For the last few general triennium, it's been called the Task Force on Creation Care and Environmental Racism. There was an effort to try to turn that task force into a standing commission, which would be kind of a more permanent interim body. But unfortunately, no efforts to create standing resolutions passed at this convention. So instead, we had a resolution on creating a task force and imagining a church grounded in creation healing as Christian ministry, which was originally submitted by Jerry and then kind of reworked to be something quite different. So thank you, Jerry, for submitting that. And then I know it got changed. This will be a church-wide committee with 16 members, at least 8 people of color, and at least 4 Indigenous members. And that was the resolution that was passed. And that committee will have all sorts of responsibilities to guide the church on creation care and to help allocate small grants for eco-justice projects. I know there are creation care grant recipients on this call. But a secondary task force was created as well. And this was, I think, a really impactful moment where in the House of Bishops, 2 Indigenous bishops, Mike Scott and Carol Gallagher, both got up to say that they really wanted to make sure that there was a task force specifically with Indigenous Episcopalians guiding the church on creation care and environmental justice ministry. And so that resolution was passed as well. And this is going to be the first time we have this kind of a Indigenous task force on creation care. And the way it's going to work is that 4 of those members on the Indigenous task force will also be the 4 Indigenous people on the broader creation care task force, sort of an experiment to create clear communication between those 2 groups and to ensure that Indigenous voices are heard. And to me, you know, it's exciting to really think about the work of confronting the doctrine of discovery being really well integrated into our work in creation care. The way that the task force and interim bodies process typically works is that sometime this fall, there will be a call for people to apply to be a part of an interim body. And I just wanted to make sure that you all know that this is not only open to people who were deputies, but anyone can put their name in to say that they're interested in being a part of an interim body. And so if you feel interested or know people who might be a really strong member of one of these task forces, please encourage them to put their names in. Anything else on this piece, Jerry or Heather?
Yeah, well, I didn't catch that the overlap, because just to get flavor here a little bit, right, there's resistance to both task forces and interim bodies, or of interim bodies of any kind, expressly said actually by the incoming presiding bishop elect, who resists this, but and apparently a great, well, Phoebe already said it, a greater resistance to a non-interim body, which is a permanent commission. The permanent commission failed. The brilliance of the guys.
Actually, I need to clarify that. The permanent commission was referred to an interim body.
You know, I was about to say your name. It was just right there. I said the brilliant work of Nuria on commission.
Sorry, I didn't mean to disrupt the meetings, but I just wanted to add clarity to that comment.
I don't know if you were here, Nuria, when I started with the wonderful work of the legislative committee, and Nuria was one of the legislative committee chairs along with Bishop Kathleen Bascom. Nuria, do you want to walk us through the resolutions that passed?
No, I did not prepare for that.
But
I can say about what was already said. It was when we began the legislative process, the Legislative Committee on Care of Creation believed that we were going to be asked to make a recommendation regarding whether there would be a standing commission for care of creation. But then that question was referred to a different legislative committee, the Legislative Committee on Structure and Governance. And they determined that it was like too big of a deal and too complicated for them to resolve during the month before general convention. So they decided that they themselves would refer it to an interim body, which I believe would be executive council. So it hasn't been decided yet. And it doesn't look what I would say doesn't look great, but it also, it is, I don't know, cloudy. The weather forecast is cloudy as to whether we will have a standing commission for care creation. When that happened, Russ Randall, who was the vice chair of the House of Deputies Care of Creation Committee, had the brilliant idea to create a resolution that could be utilized no matter what that other legislative committee did. So if that other legislative committee said no to a standing commission, it would be used for a task force. If that other legislative body said yes to a standing commission, it could be used to tell that standing commission what to do. That's what A099 turned into, and that's why it's a little wonky. But what it means is that now, as we live in this limbo with this cloudy outlook, we do know that there will be somebody in this time between general convention tasks with creation care. Okay, I'm not prepared, but I wanted to make that clear, and I turn it back over to people that actually prepared for this meeting.
Thank you, Nuria.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
I'm confused a little bit now.
That's
And
because
let's
it's
not,
confusing.
yeah, and the important, I think, for this group is to know the struggle and the heroic work at General Convention to keep something functioning and intact at the level of tech headquarters for creation care, and they succeeded in doing so. Now the details of that, so D030 still might be nothing if the if the standing commission succeeds. D030 becomes kind of null and void. The task force does not happen. Is it one or the other? Or is it possible there might be a task force and a standing body?
I would say it's unlikely, but it's up to the president of the House of Deputies and the presiding bishop. They have the responsibility of going through all of these resolutions with staff, and Phoebe being one of those staff, and trying to make things make sense. Because when you have a bicameral legislative body, 200 people in one house, 800 people in the other house, just kind of passing things back and forth to each other and saying yes to them, then you need after that process, you need rational humans to say, what did we just do? And that's kind of the time that we're in.
Yeah. But those rational humans also really worked to craft the maintenance of a functioning body for creation care. And so I think that's the outcome maybe for everybody to know. That didn't have to happen. That easily could not have happened, I think. So anyways, that.
No, that's an excellent note. There will be some sort of task force or potential standing commission. And I do hope that those in this call and people in your networks consider putting your name forward for that. Nuria, feel free to jump in at any point. I just got a couple of questions in the chat about the budget process. Many of you may have been following that. There's been a lot of efforts to sort of add commentary to the budget. The step that we're at now is that everything that is marked in green is a budget request, but there is a process this fall that involves leadership in the House of Deputies and the new presiding bishop and the budget committee on determining which of these budget requests are actually heard. Some of you may have heard that there's typically about $2 million to be allocated to these requests, and sometimes upwards of $9 or $10 million requested. The total request for creation care that sort of is the sum of all of these notes in green here is $550,000 for the triennium. And so it won't be determined until September whether these are actually funded, but I wanted to mark which ones are requests. Jerry and I were talking about how these networking and net zero resolutions have a lot of potential for involvement from provinces 4 and 5. The one that passed is resolution A021 to create a Care of Creation loan program modeled after an existing economic justice loan program that already exists. The $30,000 a year is for a piece of operating that fund, and the $3 million would be a part of this loan portfolio. And the hope would be that this really fills a gap in providing low interest loans for diocese, institution, and congregations that are working on carbon net zero. I'm just going to run through these and we can chat more. The next is B002, Ecoregion Creation Networks. Some of you may have been hearing from our friends in Kansas and across the Midwest who are forming an Episcopal Grasslands network. And there was a real investment in more regional networking, as well as a piece of the resolution that invites networking around renewable energy and agrarian and food justice and Good News Gardens, though those pieces weren't allocated the funding. The $30,000 a year was to creating these new creation networks. The next resolution, D050, was to allocate more funding towards meeting our carbon neutrality commitments, $225,000 for staff. This would be an additional churchwide staff person at an associate level supporting the creation care efforts across the church. And then while this resolution was up, there was a really powerful set of testimony from bishops in Province 9, places like Colombia, Ecuador, all of those non-US Province 9 dioceses who stood up and talked about how much climate change is impacting those places, and asked for specific funding to help Province 9 dioceses work on creation care and net zero. And so there was a request for $30,000 a year for that Province 9 work. And then A098, some of you may have heard about the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is an effort to pass that as a part of the United Nations climate change process. And this resolution that I know members of this call worked on is inviting all Episcopal Church dioceses to review their use of fossil fuels and create plans to reduce fossil fuels and report that back to the churchwide office. Heather, Jerry, anything on these?
I was just, go ahead.
I was just, Steve asked oh, no, I was at, Chuck asked, have ecoregions been defined? I was talking with Bishop Kathleen Bascom from Kansas at the Province 7 event and part of the Grasslands group. Apparently she's been talking to Bishop Bonnie Perry, Michigan, and some other people about how it might work to do something with water in Province 5. My understanding is that the ecoregions could be defined by the people who are putting it together to say, hey, here's our ecoregion. So that's what I think right now. And just a heads up, I know we're going really fast, like Phoebe's like going through them. I did turn on transcripts, so I'll include that in the notes that I put up on the Province 5 webpage with the recording. And you can also watch the recording, maybe at slower speeds. And also a reminder, right, like there are lots of things, lots of pieces, and we'll keep coming back to the most important pieces for this network. So if there's something that catches your interest, great. If you're just like, whoa, fire hose, I don't know. Hang on to it. We'll get there when it comes around, especially if it gets funding. Because if it doesn't get funding, then we don't know. Jill, do you want to go? And then we'll go back to
just
Jerry.
wanted to say, if you could just pause for a second and say the number, like A098, when you start talking about that paragraph, so I know where to look to kind of correspond. I've got your whole thing open on another screen, which is more readable for me.
I love that, the two screens. I'd be happy to. And just echoing what Heather said, a lot of this is at a very early stage where it's not necessarily actionable all over yet, but it's exciting to be able to talk to you all about what is coming soon. And Heather said yes, especially if it is funded. Any other questions on these four before we move?
B002 is one of them that I think will impact our work the most, along with whatever body exists at HQ. I guess those two for me are the biggest things that impact what we do. So I dropped in the chat, just the resolves from B002 about the things that kind of strike me as, crossing our path here, and welcoming every existing provincial Good News Garden, Episcopal agrarian. So they mentioned that it's cognizant of us, which is something I think that happened in Committee 15 too, and when this was getting built in the first place. That notice that these networks share the following marks: host online and in-person gatherings. Hey, that's so what I will be curious about is how much overlap and cooperation we will see happen over time with these. And then the last one that I put in chat here strikes, I do not know, Phoebe or Neria, either one, if you guys know of a already passed resolution that calls on dioceses to establish creation care commissions. Has that been resolved before? Because if it hasn't,
as soon as you put that in the chat, that was the question I was holding too, has there been a specific call to create diocesan committees before?
right?
And you were saying if this hasn't,
then here it is. You look surprised at that. Yeah.
Oh, I'm just going over to the archives. I feel like we have done something like that, but I think it's been more like we encourage things. In A087 in 2022, we encouraged dioceses to pursue their own goal of net carbon neutrality by 2030. But that's different from saying that you have to do it by that. I just put the link to A087 of 2022 in the chat. That's different than saying create a diocesan creation care commission.
Yeah, and to call it a commission is not insignificant either, I'm guessing.
It's so fun how General Convention passed that every diocese should have a standing commission for creation. Without passing that, it also wanted to have one.
And here we are. Yeah, that's right.
I think we'll maybe come back to those networking ones, but I want to give brief sort of recognition of a few more. 2 resolutions related to liturgy passed. One was resolution D041 to support the adoption of an ecumenical feast day of creation in our liturgical calendar and to encourage celebration of the season of creation. The first question that you may have is, when is the feast day going to be and what's it going to look like? But this resolution is actually a little bit earlier on in the process of the creation of that feast day. It's an ecumenical effort, so Christian denominations are hoping to come together to create that. So the resolution states that we support that and want to participate and calls on the Standing Commission on Liturgy and Music to get involved in that process. But the actual date and some of those other details are to be determined in broader ecumenical collaboration. But it does encourage the celebration of the season of creation, which Episcopalians have participated in for many years now, between September 1st and October 4th. And Jerry, we were going to mention just some of the season of creation organizing that's going on at some point. I'll put that link in the chat too. But that's an exciting ecumenical piece. Ruth Myers and others worked hard on that resolution. And then the second one was that there was an effort to pass a resolution adding creation care language to the baptismal covenant. That actually got sent back to the Standing Commission on Liturgy and Music rather than passing now. But it does encourage congregations that wish to add creation care language to the baptismal covenant to request the permission to do so. So it sort of walked a bit of a middle path on that piece.
Yeah. I think an important thing to ponder when it comes to season of creation versus, we call it verses. I'm calling it verses here just for a second. A feast day. So just what I heard from Margaret Bullitt Jonas is, we have been used to talking about season of creation here in this community, since which is at that September 1 through St. Francis feast and so on and so forth. That's a whole liturgical season, which creates a whole set of questions and issues. A feast day is a more, I think, and I'm guessing here, so you guys who actually know something can speak to it, but a feast day is more a ecumenical and worldwide effort that's not the same as the season of creation. And so the feast day, it was decided, I think, is the better way forward. I think just because it is more applicable ecumenically. So that with that half-baked understanding, any comment about that?
And Chuck Berry also said that some people said, instead of a season of creation, aren't we celebrating it all year? So different perspectives on that.
Right. And the other interesting comment on that is that if you look for corresponding liturgical celebrations that celebrate the Nicene Creed, the only part of the creed that has not gained a place in the liturgical calendar was the very first line, about God the Creator. And so that was part of the ecumenical argument for a feast of creation as a actual liturgical missing piece, worthy of correction. So anyway, so that's also something to kind of ponder.
But they're not mutually exclusive, right?
What is they exclusive from what?
A feast day and a season of
Oh,
creation.
no, not at all. No, no, it was just a different reach, I think, or a different tool, maybe is the way to say it too. In Kentucky, I'm pretty sure that a feast day would be an easier sell to the bishops than a season. And so on. So even practically, it might be of value. So anyway, for us, it's just good to think through what all these good hearts are trying to establish and pull off with each other of importance.
Nuri, do you want to say the liturgy, sort of more about the liturgy page?
The Episcopal Church is amazing in its diversity of URLs, and it is with some chagrin that I share the URL to episcopalcommonprayer.org. In our church, the General Convention authorizes liturgy that can be used throughout the church, and the Standing Commission on Liturgy and Music has developed this website, episcopalcommonprayer.org, to share the liturgies that have kind of passed through the church's processes. I know in my diocese, and I'm sure in others, there are a set of trial use or experimental use liturgies for creation, the season of creation, that have been authorized by our bishops. So I put this link here so you know that the church also provides a place where you can see what the church as a whole has decided. And the church as a whole has not been asked to consider those trial use liturgies yet that are locally authorized.
That's helpful context.
Which also probably is a good context to talk about talk about season of creation from Dio, Western Mass. Would that be right? This be the place to make that distinction in a way so the Diocese of Western Massachusetts, has been working for years on you know, a very responsible and one could even say conservative liturgy of celebration of the season of creation for use in churches, it has to be approved by each and any bishop operating per diocese. And I don't know what the current number is now. Is 30 plus 40 something dioceses for 2024 that have approved its use this year. I mean, I think that's how it kind of goes, right? It's almost like a task force versus a standing commission too. It's good as long as it's been authorized to be good, and then it disappears. Anyway, so there is an existing very thoroughly detailed, written 70 plus pages of season of creation liturgy that has now been approved by many bishops, not all, not the season of, not Kentucky. But just to say to you, if you are in a parish or in a diocese that is interested, now is the time to be planning, and that resource exists. You may or may not be aware whether you're in a diocese where it has been approved or not. And so you could look into that and see where you guys stand as far as this coming September goes, and so on.
And I put in the chat the list of dioceses that have approved that season of creation liturgical guide so far. I think there have been at least 42, and that the Reverend John Lean is accepting more bishops signing on until September 1st. So it's a good window of time now.
But just to be clear for folks, this is not what was approved in convention. A feast day was what was approved in convention. So do not be thrown off by that.
Phoebe, do you happen to know whether the season of creation resources have been provided to convention for standing committee for review?
Provided to the Standing Committee on
Liturgy Music?
There was some communication in the last in the last biennium, but it was not something that Standing Commission reviewed. My sense is that that's a hope that Margaret and John have for this triennium to share that with that Standing Commission. But I haven't heard if that has happened yet. Have you?
No,
I think that especially since the Standing Commission is being kind of like directly invited by this resolution to participate in those conversations, that making sure that connection happens, that could be a really strong step. But yeah, I think everything that you just said, Jerry, to clarify that season of creation liturgical guide was really a grassroots Episcopal effort, but an effort that many bishops have supported. The next set of resolutions, I just sort of gave the title Support for Environmental Justice Efforts. These 4 resolutions came from different dioceses. They represent a lot of remarkable local Episcopal work on eco-justice. But I also just want to say that the Environmental Legislative Committee under Nuria's leadership really added to each of these resolutions a lot of really strong local suggestions that your congregation could actually do to be doing your small part in this big effort. So these are all like very long, kind of rich resolutions to go through for local ways of participating in the Anglican Communion Forest Initiative. That's A084, which is all about conserving ecosystems, planting and protecting trees, and other efforts to protect biodiversity. And we're reminded that forests are an important piece of that, but grasslands and mangroves and kind of all sorts of other ecosystems are also a piece of that. The second is A167, Episcopal Church recognizing the injustice to Indigenous peoples with regard to the need for clean water, and calling on the Office of Government Relations specifically to continue their advocacy for Indigenous and Native peoples' rights involving water resources. That resolution is sort of a similar theme, but of a sort of different outcome to the one following it, D008, the protection of water. Water is life. Some of you may know the Reverend Jen Latham and some of the other amazing leaders in the Diocese of Hawaii who've been dealing with a real crisis of water there, and passed this resolution to affirm not just in their specific context, but in other situations in which Indigenous and Native peoples' rights to safety and restoration of their water, and inviting us to all be thinking and acting more on that. And then the final one sort of in this set is biodiversity. Some of you may have heard of the 30 by 30 initiative for biodiversity. This is D029. That initiative is a goal of conserving 30% of land and water by 2030. And this resolution, especially the Environmental Legislative Committee ensured, has lots of localized ideas of what an individual congregation or diocese or other Episcopal institution can be doing on biodiversity. What thoughts or questions on these few? I'm opening my chat. Oh, all the questions were still about the season of creation, I think. I think these are exciting. Many continue work that was already happening, but affirm our sort of church-wide commitment to it. None of these had a specific budgetary request. That's maybe helpful to know as well. And then the last two I'll just speak about are two resolutions related to ethical investing. The first being A028, reaffirming the Episcopal Church's commitment to consider ethical concerns in investing, including under this specific framework of ESG, environmental, social, and governance investing. And this resolution was drafted, in my understanding, at least in part because there have been efforts by governments to actually outlaw ethical criteria or ESG investing. And this is stating that the Episcopal Church does think that ethical screens in where our church endowments are invested, we do believe in. And then A029, continuing the push towards fossil fuel divestment. So calling on all remaining investments in fossil fuel industry companies in the DFMS portfolio be sold by the end of this year. And then encouraging, again, sort of mandating DFMS portfolio actions, but then encouraging all institutional investors across the Episcopal Church adopt the same target for divestment of fossil fuel company investments and reinvestment in clean energy alternatives.
Phew. How big of a deal is that final divestment in fossil fuels by December thing?
I would defer to my sort of finance colleagues to sort of really speak to that. I don't know the scale of the remaining investments. I do know that that refers to the DFMS portfolio, which is separate from Church Pension Group.
Oh, it ain't touching the pension group. Is it?
Has much more significant holdings.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of nodding of heads or shaking of heads in agreement with that. Yeah.
Yeah, Lala, you're, trying to go down this road a little bit in different ways. I know the Presbyterians came close to this and then stopped. They're meeting in Salt Lake City. They just probably finished their convention and did not succeed in that resolution. So I'm wondering how significant it is for us to say so.
Our resolution on fossil fuel divestment directly referenced the fact that the Church of England Pension Board is divesting from fossil fuels, and that's their more significant big pension. I know, Lala, you were involved in noting and writing about that, so thank you. Do you want to say anything more on that?
You're talking to me? No, I kind of have let it languish for a little bit. I have in mind some other people. I still think that they need to offer that as an option, but I know that it is fruitless to talk to have general convention legislate what the church pension group is going to do. They've made that quite clear that it can't be legislated for them. And so that's why I think I picked that up just from talking to like Margaret and who's the Green Faith guy? Anyway,
Fletcher.
they've worked it for years, and pension group won't budge. So I'm trying an end run, but yeah, I've kind of let that lapse to let general convention happen. So maybe back at it, huh?
Yeah.
Well, and back in February, you compiled some great history on fossil fuel divestment. So I just put your blog post in the chat.
Oh,
And
okay.
important for this group, maybe the general important thing is when you're talking about the Episcopal Church divesting the retirement fund, the pension fund, and kind of the rest of things are two separate animals in two separate places. And so general convention has no say over what the pension fund does, I think is a very general conclusion, right? So anyway, just to help everyone, there's a lot of big money in of course, the pension fund, but it is independent of our legislation as a body. Is that an accurate statement? So don't go out being misjudging how things should be working when there's such a distinction as that. So anyway, that's good for us to understand when we talk about this stuff. Right, as Neria said, church pension is separately incorporated, so we can legislate till the cows come home. Not gonna. So what Lala's doing, I guess we'll finish this conversation. Then we just, I guess, Phoebe, if you're down, need to kind of open it up. Lala's been trying to influence the pension fund through clergy desire for the application of ethical criteria to their pensions. And that can't be legislated. It can, however, be community organized. Or something like that. So anyway, just to know these channels out of which this kind of work is happening. Okay. General convention elects the board. Well, that's interesting. So there is an avenue of influence if we were well enough organized, I guess. It begs a question about our priorities. Meaning those of us who are living on the pension, such as I, do I want them having great and wonderful return above all else, right? Or some other set of criteria.
There is another distinction that I still have to work out and understand, but the pension fund that clergy have, my understanding is it may not be that you actually have any control of it because it is contributed by the churches. It is not where you contributed it, the churches contributed it. So I'm running into, is it even possible for the clergy to say, this is where we want our money if you have not made the contribution? So I'm kind of thinking of that as, yeah.
I was once advised that if I was seeking to influence the church pension group, which at that point I was pondering, and that's about as far as I got, pondering, I was advised that a fruitful direction could be the part of one's retirement that one contributes directly through the RSVP, I think, doesn't really have a great option for social good. And that lobbying the CPG to come up with a better option for that portion of retirement assets could be effective.
Yeah, somebody else suggested that same thing. It's just that is a very, very, very small part of what the pension group is managing. So the big part is the contributions from the churches. But yeah, it's a start, right?
Okay, Phoebe, what are you saying? Are we got like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I just want to say again, you know, just to uplift again the hard work that went into these, but also, you know, these are hard to parse even for us in this group of leaders. And they mean even less in this form to all of our fellow congregants. And so kind of the exciting question being, what about this is meaningful? How can we tell stories about these in a way that makes an impact? And then how do we make sure that the resources, funding, liturgical resources, other pieces that are going to come from this can actually reach people in our communities? So that's my closing thought, I think. And Heather.
Yeah, I think that, thanks for sharing that piece, Phoebe. I think that for those of us in the room, we need to just, it's great to have this big picture. Right now we have a big picture. So again, if there is anything that Phoebe covered today or that you see when you go back through that list, that you're like, oh my gosh, this seems to have some pieces to it that I want to talk about, let us know. After General Convention 2022, there was a small group of the Creation Care networks that decided to get together and talk through how might we help enact some of the General Convention resolutions. How can we talk to people about them? So we can talk some more about that. We will also absolutely keep you informed when the interim body gets formed. Was that it may get formed, or it's definitely getting formed? Is something... Okay, we don't know. If something comes up and we're like, hey, we should flood this, then we should talk about that. And then now is the time to start planning for General Convention, the 82nd General Convention, right? In 6 months from now, we need to start figuring those pieces out.
In Arizona, where there are water issues.
Where it's going to be 117 degrees every day during General Convention. So, oh, Phoebe did put in the chat, something will get formed. So and we'll work with you on that if that's something that you're interested in working at a church-wide level, or if you want to start working at your parish level, we still have resources for that. One of the things I just dropped in the chat is Plastic Free July. Thanks to Lela for finding that. It was in her newsletter that she put out to her diocese. Again, if you want local action items, there are things that you can do. So you don't have, so just, it depends on where you are. And if you need help or to talk through it, I'm available, Jeanette's available, Jerry's available. We're here to help you do that. And we haven't even, did we talk about Love God, Love God's World? See, we have to talk about that. Oh my gosh, Love God, Love God's World has launched. Yay. I don't know how that happened, Phoebe, but we're all excited. So, I have signed up, Jerry signed up. We're talking about, do you want to do this at a provincial level? Do you want to do this in your parishes? Clearly, that's not going to happen in today's conversation in the next 2 minutes. I will drop our emails in the chat again. So if you're interested, Pro 5 is happy to host a thing if that makes the most sense. And if it doesn't, then we'll work out another plan too. So, oh, there it is. Phoebe put the sample session and registration. So
yeah, let's and what I was thinking about this, Heather, is Phoebe, if you would speak to us. I think so far the most muddled thing in folks' heads about this curriculum is, what is a registration? Why don't I get a password? What do I have to claim a password? So can you clarify for us exactly how that works?
I'm happy to. Many of you may have participated in the Sacred Ground Race Dialogue series. This works exactly like Sacred Ground. So the registration is for someone who's intending to host a small group and go through this curriculum together. To register, you don't need the names of everyone who's going to be in your group. You just need an estimate of how many people will be in your group. You fill out a brief registration form and you get an email with the password to the rest of the curriculum. If you're having trouble with that, or if you want more information before you register for some reason, please just let me know.
Right. And a difference, I think, from Sacred Ground is, did Sacred Ground require training for leaders?
Yes.
And this is not, is that not
Yes.
true?
Well, we had
I see
a
her
we had to
shaking her
have
head, not hear it yet. No.
Jeanette,
Uh,
Jeanette,
Some,
yes. So yes, we had a training.
you
We had
did
training.
not- when Sacred Ground first launched, there wasn't a training.
Oh.
It got
Okay, I'm sorry.
developed as the curriculum got developed. I would expect that we would see that then happen with this curriculum also.
Okay. So yes.
but it's meant to be taken up in a grassroots way. So any of you are welcome to register to lead a circle or to invite someone else in your context to do so.
All right, Heather, I see a hand.
I just put in chat, and if you're going to host a group that you're going to do via Zoom and you're open to other people joining, then let us know that too. So either way that you want to go, if you're like, hey, I want to join, I don't want to think, I don't want to put together a group, I don't want to lead that, let one of the provinces know. If you're like, no, I'm ready to go and I'm going to do it on Zoom and I can let other people in, we can share that with this group too.
Yep. All right, we're at hour. Any final things, questions, urgencies? This caucus will continue. I think in fact got a meeting tomorrow maybe about that, but I think it will be open to folks. So somebody already said, I don't know if it's Phoebe, that something will continue. There will probably be several things that will continue, the caucus being one of them. So that, yes, we'll have a 3-year head start on next year's convention rather than showing up, months in advance and then doing what we can. So yeah, so stay tuned to newsletters. Those newsletters are really helpful. So subscribe to the newsletters. Phoebe's newsletter, Problem 4 and 5. Okay, Phoebe, you collected hundreds, I think, of new subscribers in Louisville. Yes.
Yes, and thank you for your help with that, Jerry. That was great.
All right. Blessings, everyone. Any final things? Otherwise, go with grace out into all the world. Bless everything and everyone you meet. And bring the kingdom of God wherever and whatever way you can as you go.
Thanks be to
Be all.
God.
Thanks.